Right, so welcome everyone to today's training, today's webinar. This is a two-part series with Botanica, Elevate Your Immunity with Herbs. Today's part one, we're going to talk about acute support and recovery. And, a lot of us right now are understandably, we are going through way more stress than we ever have been. Stress is coming at us from all different angles, whether it's financial, emotional stress, whatever that is, employment. And of course, we're all very, very concerned about our immune systems as well. And that's really going to be the focal point of today's session. We want to focus on how to support ourselves from the stress side of things and how to support ourselves from the immune side of things. I just want to say right out the gates, at the time of recording this, we do not have any proven solutions for COVID-19. So this presentation is not geared towards curing coronavirus or tackling coronavirus or anything like that. And I think by the end of today's session, my general message here is we should really be focusing on building resiliency, on building up our immune systems, on strengthening, on toning ourselves so that we can improve our terrain and become stronger. Okay, so my name is Brett Hawes. I am a certified functional medicine practitioner, a clinical nutritionist, and I've been in this health and wellness space for almost 20 years. I'm practicing about 15, 16 years now. I taught at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition for about 12 years, and I am a professional educator that works with a number of different companies doing trainings and sessions like this. Out of all of the companies that I work with, I have to say that without question, Botanica has to be at the top of the list for so many different reasons. Botanica as a company, I just want to give you a lightning fast overview as to why I like them anyway. The Botanica really is very, very mindful and careful about where we're sourcing ingredients from, how things are grown, who we're partnering with. And that goes all the way from the field and where we're sourcing our raw materials all the way through to the people that we partner with in terms of actually manufacturing products. So we are true artisans of great nutrition. We are a Canadian company. The goal is, our sort of mantra, if you will, is making herbs and superfoods easy to understand and really bumping up our daily nutrition so that if you're eating a good, healthy diet, we can enhance that diet with herbs, with superfoods, and so on. We use whole plant ingredients. So we don't use any isolated extracts. We're not pulling out any sort of medicinal compounds or therapeutic compounds. We're using whole herbs, whole superfoods. We don't use any binders, any fillers, any GMO foods at all. So none of that, squeaky clean. And of course, we're also using a very rigorous craft process. Then that's going to depend on the product. So whether we're talking about our liquid capsules, whether we're talking about our ferments or tinctures, we've partnered with people to really ensure that we maintain the highest integrity of the plant materials that we're including in the products. We also respect herbal traditions, and this is a really key point for me because we're not jumping on to the latest and greatest thing. We're actually using herbs that have stood the test of time, both in the Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine modalities. So what's on today's session? We're going to be talking about immune system basics, immunity and stress, which is so huge, lifestyle and some dietary tips to help with prevention, stress support, immune support, and then of course some key takeaways as well. So it's helpful for us to start off by understanding what the immune system is. And I think when most people think of the immune system, they automatically think of defense or defend, and then we think of foreign invaders. And that's 100% correct. So the immune system, that's the main function, is to protect us from foreign organisms, from foreign invaders. And when it's working properly, it differentiates between my own cells, my own good bacteria and microbiome, and then things that might be potentially harmful, such as viruses, parasites, bacteria, yeast, and so forth. But there's a second part that a lot of people forget about or simply don't know about, and that is the immune system is also involved with repair. Okay, so if you think about an injury, if I cut myself, what happens is I get swelling, I get redness, I get heat. We get a lot of the nutrients and white blood cells that get triaged to the injury sites. And as time goes by, that inflammation will swell down. It might scab over, and then the scab's going to come off, and my tissue is healed. That is acute inflammation, which is the first sign of healing, right? So inflammation in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is that if we're too busy defending all the time, we don't have enough time or resources to focus on repair. And so what happens is we now open the door to chronic inflammation, and we also open the door to chronic degenerative disease. And you might have heard this before, that inflammation is the silent killer, but also inflammation is at the root of virtually all chronic degenerative disease. So by supporting our immune system, we actually are on the back end also supporting a healthy inflammatory or inflammation response. So there are some key components to the immune system. If you look to the right-hand side here at the top, I'm just going to get my handy dandy spotlight here. So we've got our thymus gland, which sort of sits right here in the sort of where your breastbone is, just underneath your throat. The thymus gland is a key component of the immune system. It actually shrinks as we get older. So it's very, very important that we take care of the rest of our immune system so that we can support our thymus. Now, our microbiome is just such a hot topic these days. So much research coming out every single day on how important our microbiome is for general health. But when people think of microbiome, they typically think of the bacteria in the gut. Okay, and that's not necessarily incorrect. It's just a little bit maybe incomplete. Your microbiome technically is the organisms that live in and on you. So we actually have different types of bacteria that live in our ears, in our eyes, in our mouth, in our skin. And then of course, we have a whole colony of different organisms that live in our gut. So many of you might know this, but 70% of our immune system is in fact in our gut. And that is largely controlled and moderated by good bacteria, aka probiotics. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how we can really support our microbiome, but that should really be a key focal point for anyone looking to support their immune system. We also have lymphatic cells, right? So the lymphatic system mirrors the circulatory system, and the lymphatics essentially transport immune cells, if you will, but they also double up as a sort of waste removal system. So really, really important. If the lymphatic system is not moving, that really congests the immune system as well. We also have other components like white blood cells. We have specialized immune cells, things like natural killer cells, B cells, T cells, macrophages, and so forth. So let's talk about the terrain. Okay, so a lot of people are very concerned about things coming in, and we're taking a lot of things, we're doing a lot of things, but it's really important to understand that we need to take care of the terrain, or in this case particularly, we need to look after our gut microbiome. So from a very macroscopic perspective, if we look to nature, we know that there is strength in biodiversity. So the more, different types of species in a forest, for example, the more trees, the more plants, the more animals, the healthier that forest is. And it's exactly the same in your own microbiome, in our gut. We want to have as diverse as possible population of microorganisms and bacteria and probiotics. And we also want to have a high number of those organisms as well. So that really ties into the germ versus the terrain. And the germ theory is absolutely real, but we need to also consider that a healthy terrain means that you're going to be way more resilient, way more strong, and way more robust in terms of how your immune system functions. So a strong terrain depends on a number of body systems. These include digestion, detoxification, circulation, and way more. So when people think of a strong immune system, typically the way a lot of, the sort of general framing is people always talk about boosting your immune system, right? And I think it's important for us to understand that when you really look at the immune system, it's not a linear system that just sort of is either 100% or 70% or 50%. It's actually, I look at it as a symphony, right? As an orchestra, because you've got all these different branches of the immune system that all play off one another. And then they're also playing off what's going on in our environment, inside of our bodies, the foods that we eat, and so on. So you might very well have branches of the immune system that might be overactive. We might have other parts of the immune system that might be underactive. And really what we're talking about is an immune system that is out of balance. So it's more correct when you talk about building a strong immune system or supporting immunity, we want to use the word balance. We want to use the words modulate. Okay, so if things are high, we can bring them down. If things are low, we can bring them up. I like to also use words like tonify, strengthen. Okay, so that's how we want to look at it. And the bottom line here is we want to support our immune system without having an overreaction or an underreaction. Okay, and that's really what modulate means. So when we have an underactive immune system, that means that our immune system is not responding properly to, let's say, something either externally or internally, and this can pave the way to sickness and chronic infection. On the flip side, if we have an overactive immune system, we might have allergies, so things from external, or we might also have autoimmune issues coming in from the internal. Now, one of the biggest things that you can do in terms of your immune system and how to help it is to get your stress levels down. So there's actually a direct relationship between cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and our immune system. And what's really interesting here, as a functional medicine practitioner, we can actually measure something called secretory IgA. Okay, so you might have heard of those Igs before, immunoglobulins, really core component of our immune system. So we have now shown through testing that we can measure cortisol and we can measure secretory IgA or SIGA. So when cortisol is up, i.e. our stress is up, SIGA goes down, our immune system goes down. Conversely, when cortisol levels stabilize and go down, SIGA can come back up. Right? So there's a direct relationship there. So if you're stressed out and you're taking all kinds of supplements and you're doing all sorts of stuff to try and boost your immune system or support your immune system without looking at stress, you really should be focused on stress as one of the primary focal points. So prevention is 100%, right, the focal point here. And of course, we want to do all of the necessary things like social distancing, washing our hands, not touching our face, and so forth. And the famous quote there from Benjamin Franklin, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, coming back to stress, right? One of the best things you can do for stress is adopt some type of mindfulness practice. So whether that is doing yoga, whether it's guided meditation, whether it's meditation, whether it's breathing exercises, whatever that is for you, whatever works, it's going to help to bring those cortisol levels back in balance. So this particular study here looked at immunity and mindfulness. So 22 participants completed an 8-week online mindfulness-based program. And what they noticed was that the program induced short-term improvements in fatigue and anxiety. So in other words, people felt less anxious, they had more energy, they felt less tired. And additionally, the last point there, their optimism improved and their mucosal immunity. So in other words, their gut barrier immunity actually improved as well. This is in 8 weeks. It's a very, very short span of time. If you have never meditated before, you've never done anything like that, there are some fantastic apps out there. You can see there Smiling Mind, Insight Timer, Calm. Headspace has been around for a while. I've used that quite a lot actually in clinic. Mind Shift and Let's Meditate. Okay, so lots of different options nowadays. When it comes to food, there are some real foundational things that we want to do. We want to look at getting enough greens into our diets. Greens fulfill so many different purposes when it comes to immunity, whether it be looking at alkalinity. Okay, so they keep our body more alkaline, they keep our GI tract, they keep the pH more balanced. When you keep the pH balanced in the GI tract, it provides an environment that is inhospitable to foreign invaders. Okay, so pathogenic bacteria, yeast, and so on. So pH is really, really key. In addition to that, we also have a lot of micronutrients. We've got chlorophyll, and we have fiber. Okay, which kind of segues into the next point on the screen here, making sure that we're eating sufficient amounts of fermented foods and probiotics, right? So we can look to ferments like sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, kefir, natto, and the list goes on. But we also want to remember to get appreciable amounts of fiber in. Okay, so fiber feeds our probiotics. Okay, feeds our good bacteria. So in addition to getting fermented foods in and probiotics, we definitely want to make sure that we're getting a diverse amount of fiber in from different sources, because what that is going to do is strengthen again our microbiome and essentially cultivate biodiversity. Now, if there's any one food that I would say to avoid, it would have to be sugar, and I think most people would agree. So particularly avoiding refined sugars, white sugars, I would actually double down and say baked goods, muffins, stuff like that. 1 teaspoon of sugar can suppress your immune system for up to 4 hours. Okay, so particularly white blood cell production. So you can imagine in a culture that is eating, anywhere from 10 to 14 teaspoons a day or 145 pounds a year of sugar, you got to wonder what that is doing to your immune system. Okay, so just these 3 basic dietary tips are going to have significant inroads when it comes to supporting your immune system. All right, so let's get into some of the cool stuff here with herbs for prevention. So we're going to focus moving forward on stress and adrenal support. When your body's stressed out, your capacity to adapt is reduced, and this 100% wreaks havoc on your immune system, your nervous system, and your inflammation. So we want to make sure that we're not just looking again at boosting adrenal function, right? That's another misconception out there. We want to use adaptogens, which I'll get into in a second, to balance out and to strengthen our adrenal glands. This recipe on the right-hand side is a super tasty recipe. You can make this at home. You can do different variations of this. This recipe includes 30 drops of our Botanica Health Adrenal Support Tincture. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about that tincture in just a second, but you can mix this with the juice of blood oranges, with some passion fruit juice, some sparkling water, and you can kind of go from there. So this is a fantastic, refreshing drink that also is going to double up as an adrenal tonic. Okay, so right, one of my favorite herbs is holy basil, also known as tulsi, very revered in the Ayurvedic tradition. And I like to look at holy basil as yoga in a bottle. Okay, that's just the way I look at it as a general. And the reason why is it really calms the mind, calms down the central nervous system, but at the same time does have a bit of an energizing property as well. So a true sort of adaptogen in that sense, but slightly more calming than some of the other adaptogens. You can see here that it also reduces brain fog. It can increase our clarity. It does have antiviral properties and calminative properties. So if something is a calminative, typically it calms us down, but it can also really help us with regards to improving digestion. Now, here's 2 big points, right? So it lowers elevated cortisol, which we discussed a little earlier relative to our immune system, and it also lowers blood sugar. Okay, so this is a really key point that a lot of people gloss over. Anyone who has adrenal issues will more than likely also have blood sugar issues, right? So typically in the early stages, we're going to see hypoglycemia. And part of that is that when we're stressed out, we secrete cortisol. And one of the functions of cortisol is to make sugar, right? So it tells our body to make glucose. When we make glucose, as we've seen, That ramps up our inflammation, it ramps up our insulin, but it also depresses our immune system. So one of the key points, and we could sort of bring in the dietary side of things as well, is to really, really focus on balancing our blood sugar, because the ripple effect of that is just huge when it comes to immune system health, but also to adrenal and stress health. Sorry, I'm just going to go back up here. Where are we? Okay, so I'll just briefly mention this because a lot of people don't know what supercritical extraction is. Essentially, supercritical extraction pulls out all of the things that cannot be alcohol extracted. All right, so that would include things like volatile oils, essential oils, terpenes, and other compounds. And what you're left with a supercritical extraction is you're left with a very, very broad spectrum herbal extraction. Okay, so way more synergy, way more variety of compounds that you're going to find in that herb. So ashwagandha is another hugely popular adaptogen. This is more of a calming or grounding adaptogen. So it's not a sedative. It's not going to put you to sleep. But a lot of people find that it makes them feel a little bit more centered, quite calm as well. So this is a rasayana tonic. And the way I look at ashwagandha is it's good for the adrenal glands, it's good for the thyroid, and it's also good for a racing mind. Okay, those are the sort of keynotes from my side. It calms the nervous system, so you can actually use this day or night. So a fantastic herb if you have insomnia. All right, so which sounds a little bit counter because we think of adaptogens as very energizing. Ashwagandha can really help cortisol spikes in the middle of the night. So if you're the kind of person that has no problem going to sleep, but you wake up in the middle of the night, ashwagandha can help you in many ways because it stabilizes blood sugar. So it can stimulate libido, supports thyroid function, which I discussed earlier, and we can use this for fatigue, for iron deficient anemia, and it's actually quite balancing to the entire endocrine system. Okay, so really good all-rounder for hormones. So we've got two products that we're featuring here. We've got our daily adrenal support liquid capsules on the left-hand side, and we've got our adrenal support liquid tincture on the right-hand side. So these formulations are quite similar in many respects, and really for people that tend to be a little bit more burnt out. Okay, so not full-blown burnout, but if you find that you're a little bit burnt out, you've got some nervous system exhaustion, that's really how you want to use these. Now, the ingredients here, I'm just going to pull out some of them, and then I'm going to talk about the difference between the capsules and the liquid and how you can sort of navigate that. So first of all, you'll notice on the capsules on the left-hand side, this has holy basil and ashwagandha. You'll actually see, so we just discussed those, but you'll see that it has oats and schisandra. So oats are a really good nervine tonic, right? So they're very grounding. They can take the edge off something that might be a little more energizing, and they can really fortify and strengthen our nervous system. Okay, so your nervous system obviously takes a bit of a beating when you're stressed out because of the relationship with the adrenal glands. Schisandra berry has a number of benefits. Obviously, the main one is that it is an adaptogen, but also helps with hormone health, with cardiovascular health, and circulation. On the right-hand side, we've got our adrenal support tincture. This has holy basil, but it doesn't have ashwagandha in it. Milky oats and schisandra I already discussed. And devil's club is a very interesting herb because it has quite a profound effect on balancing out our blood sugar. Okay, and as we discussed before, people with adrenal issues often tend to have blood sugar problems. So how do we choose between capsules and between liquid? Couple of points. The first one is capsules are typically going to be absorbed a little bit more slowly. Okay, so they tend to work over a longer period of time. They're not going to kick in right away. But the other thing with capsules is that it's very difficult to titrate the dose. So titration is a process where we can start off very slowly, and then we can increase until we hit our therapeutic dose. So with capsules, it's very difficult to do that because you've either got taking one capsule, 2, 3, or 4. With tinctures, on the other hand, especially for people that are very sensitive, you can titrate the dose, and you can literally start off with 1 drop, and you can work your way up to the 40 to 60 drops 3 times a day. Also, if you're having an acute bout of stress, or you need something that's a little bit more immediate, the tincture is definitely the way to go because it's absorbed far more rapidly. So let's talk about herbs for prevention and shift our focus on to the immune system. Okay, and remember, balance and modulation are key. Astragalus is really enjoying its moment in the sun these days. It's really being used all over the world, and lots of really great reports coming out from all over the place. So Astragalus is a deep tonic. Okay, so remember that word tonic is tonify, strengthen, and really useful for rebuilding depleted immune systems and endocrine systems. It is a true immunomodulator, so whether the immune system is overactive or underactive, it can really help to balance that out. It increases phagocytosis, white blood cell production, natural killer cell activity, and it helps to regulate our thymus gland, right? Which is, we said in the beginning of this presentation, very important. It does have antibacterial and antiviral properties, adaptogenic properties, and helps to balance out our blood sugar. So I think in light of everything we've spoken about, when you look at the keynotes for Astragalus, I think you'll see exactly why this is being recommended by so many researchers, health professionals, and so on around the world. So we have our two, I just want to make sure that our feed is up here. So we have these two products here, our Super Astragalus liquid capsules and our Immune Strength liquid. So the Super Astragalus capsules on the left, very simple formulation. We've got astragalus, we've got schisandra berry, and we've got ligustrum. So again, I think I've covered all of the keynotes on astragalus and schisandra. And on the right-hand side, we have a very broad spectrum formulation that has adaptogens and immune modulators in there. So I've just pulled out some of them, and we're going to talk a little bit more about reishi in just a second. So I'm going to hold off, but essentially that is the most widely consumed medicinal mushroom on the planet. We'll get into exactly why that is in just a second. But licorice is another herb that is also having its moment in the sun right now. And the keynotes on licorice, the first one is it is an adaptogen, right? So it tends to be a little bit more of a stimulating adaptogen. Okay, so for people that are, again, a little bit more fatigued, a little bit more burnt out, licorice can really pick you up, right? Can be very energizing, but licorice also raises blood pressure. All right, so if you have high blood pressure, or you suffer from that, or you know someone who does, you might want to be a little bit cautious with licorice. The interesting thing that's now coming out, and researchers are suggesting that licorice may actually inhibit viral replication. And that's why we're seeing it being used right now so much in Chinese medicine. So reishi is one of the features in our 7 medicinal mushrooms. So this is also a liquid tincture. And again, this is all medicinal mushrooms. When we think of mushrooms, mushrooms are always going to have as their focal point immune system as the sort of number one. And then they're going to have secondary and tertiary benefits as well, which trickle over into other body systems. So reishi particularly is a whole body adaptogen. It supports a healthy stress response. It nourishes our adrenals, our nervous system, and our cardiovascular system, which is huge right now. It can help to balance out our immune function. And of course, because of that, it helps to balance out inflammation. So when you think of mushrooms, all right, I'm just going to pull out a couple here that's not on the slides, but just to reference those. Something like maitake, for example, right? Maitake is a fantastic mushroom for immunity, but also a really good mushroom for balancing blood sugar. Okay, if you look at chaga, right? Chaga is a very popular mushroom these days. Chaga helps with DNA protection. It also is a very potent antioxidant mushroom, but it's shown to have quite a big benefit on the epithelial cells of the body. So when we think of epithelial, we think of skin on the outside, but our epithelial cells are also our respiratory tract, our sinuses, our digestive tract, and so forth, right? So this is a really fantastic formula. It is a true immune balancing and immune fortifying formula. So whether you have an overactive immune system or an underactive immune system, it can really help to balance that out. So the key takeaways, and then I'll hop into some of the comments here if we have them. The key takeaways, we want to adopt a regular mindfulness practice. We can use an app. We can do simple breathing exercises. We can, just sit quietly for 5 minutes, whatever that is for you. Some kind of mindfulness practice is really going to help support your immune system and your stress levels. We want to definitely change our dietary patterns if we're not eating well. So greens, probiotics, prebiotics, and so on, and really cut down on the sugar, right? Ideally, we want to avoid the sugar. Look to one of our Botanica adrenal support formulas, as well as our immune formulas. And if you're not sure of what you're doing, definitely consult a natural health practitioner who can maybe help guide you better through some of these choices. You can actually go onto the Botanica website. There is a directory of people like myself and other practitioners who are working with Botanica. And if you are trying to get in touch with me, you can visit my website, holistichealthmasterclass.com. I'll actually throw on the Facebook Live, I'll throw a link down to my website and Facebook page. So if you want to join me or ask me questions, that would be great. And we're going to, on Wednesday, I believe, so April 29th, same time, same place, we're going to get into part 2 of this series, which is going to be about recovery. Okay, so we want to talk about that coming up next Wednesday. I'm going to hop into the comments, and I do actually have, if there are no comments, let me just refresh the feed over here. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we got a few comments, which is great. I just want to make sure that my, forgive me, I'm going to turn down the sound. All right. I think I explained adaptogens. I hope so anyway. Adaptogens are really herbs that help us to adapt to a changing environment. Okay, that's really the simple, and they do it on a number of different ways. Typically, they're going to support our stress response and our adrenal glands. So lots of people are just bigging up holy basil, which is awesome. I know I love holy basil, one of my favorites. Actually just took some before this presentation, so feel pretty good right now, nice and calm. So a couple of questions coming up. How long to notice the benefits of oregano oil? We didn't really touch on oregano oil at all today. I just want to say, because there was a few questions actually offline about oregano. So first of all, it really depends on what your situation is. If you have some type of infection going on in the gut, whether that's SIBO, whether it's Candida, whether it's general dysbiosis, you're going to find that oregano oil is going to work pretty well instantly. And what's going to happen is it's going to start wiping out bad bacteria, and that's actually going to increase gas and bloating in the beginning. Typically what happens is as you move further down and you keep taking it, the gas and bloating are going to get better, okay, because you start to balance out your microbiome. Now, one of the things that you should know about oregano oil, which a lot of people don't, is oregano oil is mostly absorbed in the first 2/3 of the small intestine. So if you're trying to treat dysbiosis or infections in the colon or the large intestine, sometimes oregano oil doesn't work, and you might have to look to something like berberine, golden seal, olive leaf, something like that. So another question that came up offline was, are there long-term consequences, if you will, of taking oregano oil, like every day, forever and ever? And here's my answer to that, right? I don't think that we should necessarily be taking antimicrobials every day for long periods of time. And the reason for that is you can actually have what's called antimicrobial resistance or herbal resistance, where the bacteria in your gut actually get so used to you taking that herb that when you do get an infection, it's not going to work. All right. So I like to use these types of herbs in more of an acute type of situation, or I like to cycle them. So instead of doing them every day, you can maybe do a week on, a week off, and cycle different types of antimicrobial herbs. Okay. Now, another question that came up, and I'm just going to scroll here. Let's just see if I can get that. Okay. So I'll get to some of the questions on the webinar in just a second. I know some other people had some questions about oregano and blood pressure. Okay, that was a question that came up. Oregano does not raise blood pressure, so you're fine. All right. I'm going to get to questions here. So let's have a see. Okay. So, are we able to get a copy of the slideshow? I'm going to let the tech folks deal with that. So I think we're going to get one out to you. All right. So looking forward to learning about oregano oil next week, 100%. Which adrenal formula will give me more energy, capsules or liquid? Capsules will give you more energy. Okay, the capsules will give you more energy because of the rhodiola that's in there. The rhodiola typically tends to be a little bit more energizing for people. The tincture tends to be a little bit more calming. Okay, let's see. We have some other questions here. All right. Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good. So I'm going to wrap that up. If there's no more questions, thank you so much for tuning in. And again, April 29th, same time, same place, 11 a.m. PST, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be here for part 2 of our immune health series. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.